Let's begin. Imagine a guy who looks like he just woke up in a college dorm room after a 3-day League of Legends bender. He's wearing cargo shorts, an oversized t-shirt, and has hair that has clearly never negotiated a peace treaty with a comb. Now, imagine handing that guy your life savings, your retirement fund, and maybe the deed to your house, just because he drives a Toyota Corolla and mumbles about saving the world. For a brief, hallucination-induced moment in history, the world decided that Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, because 3-letter acronyms make fraud sound legitimate, was the Warren Buffett of crypto. He was the golden boy, the effective altruist, the vegan genius who slept on a beanbag chair while casually revolutionizing global finance. But behind the scenes, it wasn't a revolution. It was a dumpster fire fueled by customer deposits and managed by a group of polyamorous 20-somethings popping stimulants in a Bahamian penthouse. It was less Wall Street and more Lord of the Flies with better Wi-Fi. This wasn't just a bankruptcy. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, where billions of dollars vanished into the ether, leaving behind nothing but apologies and bad spreadsheets. From the dizzying highs of the Kimchi Premium to the cold, hard concrete of a jail cell, this is the story of FTX. 1. The magic money loop, or the Kimchi Premium. Imagine you find a store selling gold bars for $1,000 and a store across the street buying them for $1,500. You don't need a PhD in economics to know what to do. You buy, you run across the street, you sell. You repeat this until your legs fall off or the cops show up. This is called arbitrage. It's the financial equivalent of finding an infinite money glitch in a video game. Back in 2017, this is exactly what Sam Bankman-Fried stumbled upon. It was called the Kimchi Premium. Basically, Bitcoin was trading for significantly higher prices in South Korea and Japan than it was in the United States. We're talking a 10% to 50% difference. It was stupidly obvious. But here's the catch. Actually moving the money was a nightmare. The banking systems were slow, suspicious, and hated crypto. While everyone else was staring at the numbers drooling, SBF organised a convoluted system involving rural Japanese banks and an army of intermediaries to physically move the cash. He founded Alameda Research in November 2017 to exploit this gap, and for a while, it worked. Like, really worked. They were reportedly moving up to $25 million a day, skimming the cream off the top. It felt like magic. It felt like genius. But here is the financial lesson that usually gets ignored when the champagne is popping. Arbitrage is temporary. Markets are efficient. Eventually the gap closes. The glitch gets patched. By early 2018, the Kimchi Premium dried up. The easy money was gone. A normal business would pivot or scale down. But Alameda Research wasn't a normal business. They had tasted blood and massive profits, and they weren't ready to go back to being normal traders. They had built an infrastructure designed for speed and volume, and now they had nothing easy to trade. So, they decided to become a quantitative trading firm. That sounds fancy, right? It implies algorithms, math, and discipline. In reality, it meant a bunch of inexperienced traders making massive, risky bets on the direction of cryptocurrencies. Spoiler alert, they were terrible at it. 2. The leaky bucket. If you owned a casino and the house started losing money to the drunk tourists at the blackjack table, you'd probably panic. That was Alameda Research in 2018. Once the easy arbitrage money vanished, the cracks in the foundation didn't just appear, they turned into canyons. You see, the myth of SBF was that he was a trading savant. The reality, revealed much later in court, was that Alameda Research was bleeding cash faster than a frantic tourist in Las Vegas. Throughout 2018 and early 2019, Alameda's internal tracking systems were a mess. We aren't talking about sophisticated Bloomberg terminals here. We're talking about buggy spreadsheets and vibes. At one point, they managed to lose roughly $14 million simply because they couldn't keep track of their transfers. Here is a specific horror story. In 2018, the team at Alameda made a massive bet on XRP, Ripple. When you gamble that much money, you usually hedge your bet, meaning you place a smaller bet in the opposite direction just in case things go south. It's like wearing a seatbelt. Alameda forgot the seatbelt. They lost 2/3 of their assets in a generic market downturn. But the cherry on top, they once lost access to about 4 million worth of XRP just because they messed up the secret keys and passwords. Imagine locking your keys in your car, but the car is made of gold, and also, it's not your car, it's investors' money. The financial lesson here is terrifyingly simple. Leverage kills. Alameda was borrowing money to make these bets. When you gamble with your own money and lose, you're broke. When you gamble with borrowed money and lose, you're dead. By early 2019, Alameda Research was technically underwater. They were insolvent. In a sane world, they would have declared bankruptcy, packed up their beanbags, and gone home. But SBF didn't want to go home. He had a better idea. If the trading firm is losing money, why not build the casino itself? 3. Building the casino. If you can't beat the market, own the market. In May 2019, Sam Bankman-Fried and his co-founder Gary Wang launched FTX, Futures Exchange. The pitch was seductive. They claimed that existing crypto exchanges were clunky, prone to crashing, and managed by people who didn't understand complex derivatives. FTX was marketed as an exchange built by traders for traders. It promised a revolutionary risk engine that would prevent the kind of catastrophic clawbacks that plagued other platforms. A clawback in crypto is a nasty piece of business where an exchange realizes a bankrupt trader can't pay their debts, so they seize money from the profitable traders to cover the hole. It's socialism for losers. FTX promised to end this. They introduced the cross-margin system. This allowed traders to use all their assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, as collateral for their bets. It was slick, it was user-friendly, it felt professional. But here is where the sleight of hand began. To get FTX off the ground, they needed liquidity. They needed someone to be on the other side of all the trades to make sure the market moved smoothly. Who stepped up to be the primary market maker? Alameda Research. This created a conflict of interest so large you could see it from space. SBF owned the casino, FTX, and the biggest whale gambling in the casino, Alameda. In traditional finance, like the New York Stock Exchange, there are massive ironclad walls separating the exchange from the traders. This is to prevent the exchange from peeking at your cards or rigging the game. In the FTX Alameda universe, there were no walls. There wasn't even a beaded curtain. By late 2019, FTX was gaining traction. People loved the interface. They loved the speed. They loved SBF's quirky Twitter persona. But secretly, the exchange was being built on a fundamental lie. That Alameda was just another user. In reality, Alameda was beginning to enjoy special privileges, exemptions from the rules that applied to everyone else. The risk engine that was supposed to protect the exchange had a hard-coded exception. Basically, if you or I traded on FTX and ran out of money, the engine would liquidate us instantly. We'd be wiped out. But if Alameda ran out of money, the code said, let them keep playing. 4. The napkin billionaire, the FTT scam. If you have $0, you are broke. But if you create a cryptocurrency, mint 300 million coins, sell one coin to your roommate for $10, and keep the rest, congratulations. According to crypto math, you now have a market cap of $3 billion. You're technically a billionaire. This is exactly what FTX did with the FTT token. Launched in 2019, FTT was the native token of the FTX exchange. It had some actual utility. If you held it, you got discounts on trading fees. That's fine. That's like airline miles. But SBF and Alameda didn't treat it like airline miles. They treated it like solid gold bars. Here is the scam. Alameda Research held massive amounts of FTT. Because the trading volume was low, it was incredibly easy to manipulate the price upward. SBF would go out and publicly promise to buy back tokens, keeping the price high. Then Alameda would take this inflated illiquid token to other lenders and even back to FTX and say, look, we have billions of dollars in assets. Give us real loans in actual US dollars. By 2021, Alameda's balance sheet was stuffed with billions of dollars of FTT. But it was a mark-to-market hallucination. If they had tried to sell even 5% of their FTT holdings, the price would have crashed to zero. Imagine walking into a bank and asking for a mortgage. The banker asks for collateral. You pull out a stack of napkins, draw a smiley face on each one and say, "These are rare art pieces. My mum bought one for $50, so this stack is worth $10 million. If the banker is Sam Bankman-Fried, he gives you the mortgage. This allowed Alameda to borrow billions of dollars from external lenders like Voyager and BlockFi, companies that would later collapse because they trusted SBF's napkin math. They saw a balance sheet that looked healthy, not realizing it was made of monopoly money that only had value because SBF said it did. 5. The cult of the cargo shorts. By 2021, SBF wasn't just a CEO, he was a mythological creature. He was the anti-hero of capitalism. While other billionaires were buying yachts and flying to Mars, Sam was sleeping on a beanbag chair in the office, playing League of Legends during pitch meetings, and driving a beat-up Toyota Corolla. He championed effective altruism, a philosophy about making as much money as possible solely to give it all away to charity. It was the perfect shield. How could you accuse this guy of fraud? He's a vegan. He wants to cure pandemics. He has untied shoelaces. This image was carefully crafted to disarm regulators and investors, and it worked. Throughout 2021 and early 2022, the world's biggest venture capital firms, Sequoia, BlackRock, Temasek, threw money at him. They didn't just invest, they practically begged him to take their cash. SBF raised nearly $2 billion, valuing FTX at a staggering $32 billion by January 2022. But while SBF was playing the humble monk, FTX was spending money like a drunken sailor on shore leave. They spent $135 million to rename the Miami Heat's arena. They paid Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen millions to be brand ambassadors. They ran a Super Bowl ad starring Larry David. They bought $300 million worth of luxury real estate in the Bahamas for the staff. The disconnect was insane. SBF was testifying before the US Congress in December 2021, charming lawmakers with his vision of a regulated crypto future, while his company was running with zero corporate controls. They didn't have a board of directors. They used QuickBooks to manage a multi-billion-dollar entity. Expenses were approved by sending emojis on Slack. The financial lesson: due diligence is dead. The smartest investors in the room saw the cargo shorts and the messy hair and assumed, he must be a genius because he looks like a slob. They never looked at the books, they just looked at the vibe. 6. God mode. Every video game has a cheat code. In Doom, it was IDDQD. In FTX, it was a setting called Allow Negative. We established earlier that Alameda Research was bleeding money. By 2020, they owed massive amounts of cash. In a normal exchange, if Alameda couldn't pay, the system would auto-liquidate their account. But remember, SBF couldn't let Alameda fail, because Alameda was the engine and the dump truck for the whole operation. So, SBF ordered his co-founder, Gary Wang, to alter the code. They created a secret backdoor in the liquidation engine specifically for Alameda. This code change, implemented incrementally through 2019 and 2020, gave Alameda a line of credit that was essentially infinite. While normal customers had strict borrowing limits, Alameda's limit was raised to $65 billion. Yes, billion with a B. To put that in perspective, that is more than the GDP of Slovenia. This meant Alameda could borrow customer funds, your funds, whenever they wanted, for whatever they wanted without anyone knowing. Did they use this money responsibly? Of course not. They used it to make risky venture capital investments. They used it to donate over $100 million as to political campaigns, mostly Democrats. but plenty to Republicans too via dark money. During the 2022 midterm election cycle, they used it to buy back their own FTT tokens to keep the price up. It was a circular Ponzi-esque nightmare. Customers deposited money into FTX. Alameda secretly borrowed that money via the back door to make bad bets. When the bets failed, they borrowed more customer money to cover the holes. It was like using your neighbour's credit card to pay off your gambling debts, but your neighbour is millions of people, and you're also the bank managing the credit card. And for a long time, nobody noticed because the crypto market was booming. As long as line go up, nobody asks where the money's coming from. 7. When the tide goes out. There is an old Wall Street saying, you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. In May 2022, the tide didn't just go out. It evaporated, leaving the entire crypto industry standing on the beach, shivering and very, very naked. This was the month the Terra Luna ecosystem collapsed. It was a $60 billion implosion that happened faster than you can say algorithmic stablecoin. It was the financial equivalent of a nuclear reactor melting down in the middle of a crowded city. Panic spread instantly. Prices crashed. Bitcoin tumbled. And most importantly, the credit crunch began. For years, crypto lenders like Voyager, Genesis and BlockFi had been handing out loans like candy on Halloween. But when Luna crashed, these lenders suddenly woke up from their coma, looked at their balance sheets, and screamed. They started issuing margin calls. This is a polite way of saying, hey, remember that $1 billion I lent you? I need it back. Now. Alameda Research was on the hook for billions in loans from these third-party lenders. In a normal world, Alameda would have sold some assets to pay back the loans. But remember item 4? Alameda's assets were mostly FTT and other SAM coins, like Serum and MAPS, tokens with huge theoretical value but zero actual liquidity. You can't pay $1 billion debt with tokens nobody wants to buy. So by June 2022, Alameda was technically insolvent. Again. They owed billions they didn't have. SBF had a choice. He could admit defeat, declare bankruptcy for Alameda, and try to save FTX, the exchange. It would have been humiliating, sure. He would have lost his status as the golden boy, but he might have stayed out of prison. Instead, he chose the double-down strategy. He decided that the hole in the bucket wasn't big enough, so he grabbed a shotgun to widen it. He decided that Alameda must not fail, no matter the cost. And the only place left to find cash was the one place he promised never to touch. 8. The Great Piggy Bank Raid. If you run a bank, and you take money from a customer's checking account to buy yourself a private island, that is called embezzlement. If you do it with crypto, SBF apparently thought it was called risk management. Throughout the summer of 2022, as lenders were banging on the door demanding their money, SBF and his inner circle made the fatal decision. They opened the tap. They began siphoning customer deposits from FTX directly into Alameda Research to pay off those external loans. We aren't talking about a few $1,000s, we're talking about billions. The irony here is thick enough to choke on. During this exact time period, June and July 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried went on a public PR tour posing as the saviour of crypto. He offered to bail out struggling companies like BlockFi and Voyager. He gave interviews talking about the need for stability. He was literally using stolen customer money to buy bankrupt companies, to maintain the illusion that he had infinite money. It's like a firefighter setting your house on fire, then using the water from your own pool to put it out, and expecting you to thank him for his heroism. Internally, the panic was setting in. Caroline Ellison, CEO of Alameda and SBF's ex-girlfriend, was creating spreadsheets trying to hide the hole. In one infamous document, she prepared 7 different versions of the balance sheet to show to lenders, trying to find the one that looked the least criminal. They eventually settled on Alternative 7, which hid the billions of dollars owed to customers under a vague label. The financial lesson: if a CEO has to create 7 versions of a balance sheet, run. There is only one version of the truth in finance. Everything else is fiction writing. By September 2022, the hole in customer funds was roughly $8 billion. They had gambled it, spent it on endorsements, and used it to pay back other loans. The money was gone, and the only thing keeping the scheme alive was secrecy. As long as nobody asked to see the receipts, the party could continue. 9. The fatal PDF. History turns on the weirdest things. The Titanic hit an iceberg. Al Capone got caught on tax evasion. Sam Bankman-Fried got taken down by a PDF. On November 2nd, 2022, a reporter named Ian Allison at CoinDesk published a scoop that changed everything. He had gotten his hands on a leaked private balance sheet from Alameda Research. For years, SBF had claimed that FTX and Alameda were separate entities. A firewall, he called it. But the leaked document showed that Alameda had $14.6 billion in assets. That sounded good until you looked closer. A massive chunk of that equity, about $6 billion, was FTT tokens. Another huge chunk was Solana locked and other illiquid crypto tokens. The article exposed the naked truth. The emperor had no clothes, and his billions were actually just vouchers he had printed himself. The foundation of the entire empire was circular. Alameda rested on FTT, and FTT's value rested on the belief that Alameda was solvent. This article was the spark in a room full of dynamite. But the explosion didn't happen immediately. It needed a detonator. Enter Changpeng Zhao, CZ, the CEO of Binance. CZ was SBF's arch-rival. They hated each other. SBF had been bad-mouthing CZ to regulators in Washington for months trying to get Binance banned. CZ had been waiting for a moment to strike back. On November 6, 2022, 4 days after the leak, CZ tweeted. It was a masterclass in corporate assassination. He casually announced that due to recent revelations, Binance would be selling its entire holding of FTT tokens, worth about $580 million. He didn't scream, he didn't use all caps, he just calmly pulled the pin on the grenade and tossed it into SBF's lap. The market saw the tweet and realised, if Binance is dumping FTT, the price is going to zero, and if FTT goes to zero, Alameda is bankrupt, and if Alameda is bankrupt, who has my money? Panic. 10. The bank run from hell. You know that feeling when you realise you left the stove on, but you're already on a plane? Now imagine that feeling, but instead of a stove, it's your life savings, and instead of a plane, you're stuck in a Twitter thread. On November 6th and 7th, 2022, the bank run began. A bank run is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everyone thinks the bank is out of money, they rush to withdraw. Because they rush to withdraw, the bank runs out of money. In just 72 hours, users withdrew $6 billion from FTX. SBF tried to stop the bleeding with lies. On November 7th, he tweeted the now infamous lie, FTX is fine. Assets are fine. He later deleted this tweet, which is the legal equivalent of trying to unshoot a sheriff. Behind the scenes, the Game of Thrones turned into a frantic scramble for survival. SBF was texting everyone, billionaires, hedge funds, even the Saudis, begging for cash. Can you send $1 billion? Can you send $5 billion? I promise I'm good for it. But nobody was biting. The data was out. The on-chain sleuths were watching the wallets drain. Then, the ultimate humiliation. On November 8th, SBF announced that he had reached a deal to sell FTX to Binance. He had to go to his archenemy, kiss the ring, and beg for a bailout. The internet exploded. It looked like CZ had won. He had checkmated SBF, but the victory lasted about as long as a Snapchat streak. Less than 24 hours later, on November 9th, Binance walked away. They had taken one look at FTX's internal books, the real ones, not the alternative 7 spreadsheet, and essentially said, "Whoa, absolutely not. This isn't a company, it's a crime scene." Binance tweeted, "The issues are beyond our control or ability to help." Translation, "This thing is radioactive." With the bailout dead, the music stopped. SBF stopped tweeting, briefly. The withdrawals froze. Millions of users refreshed their screens, staring at pending notifications that would never clear. The $32 billion empire was effectively worth zero. 11. The bankruptcy of the century. If you think filing your taxes is complicated, imagine trying to file bankruptcy for a company that doesn't even know who its employees are. On November 11th, 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried resigned, and FTX officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. To clean up the mess, the court appointed John J. Ray III as the new CEO. Now, John J. Ray III isn't just some corporate suit. He is the guy they call when things go spectacularly wrong. He's the guy who cleaned up Enron. He has seen fraud, corruption, and incompetence on a global scale. He is the final boss of bankruptcy. And yet, when he opened the books at FTX, he was horrified. In his very first filing to the court, he wrote a line that instantly became legendary in financial history. "Never in my career have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here." He wasn't done. He noted that FTX didn't have an accounting department. They didn't have a list of bank accounts. They used software to auto-delete internal communications. They used corporate funds to buy homes and personal items for employees, documenting it not with loan agreements, but with random emojis in chat logs. It was revealed that the board of directors was basically just SBF and a couple of friends. There were no meetings, no minutes, no oversight. Just a group chat named Wire Fraud. Okay, the chat wasn't actually named that, but it might as well have been. The actual group chat for the inner circle was ironically named Wire Fraud by some accounts, though others say it was just a signal group called Chat. The scale of the hole was finally confirmed. Roughly $8 to $10 billion in customer money was missing. 12. The apology tour and why it failed. Most people, when caught committing one of the largest financial crimes in history, would lawyer up and shut up. Their attorneys would tape their mouths shut. SBF is not most people. Throughout late November and December 2022, while sitting in his penthouse in the Bahamas, SBF decided to go on a media tour. He did interviews with the New York Times, Good Morning America, and random Twitter spaces. His strategy? The "I'm just a dumb kid" defense. He kept saying things like, "I didn't know," "I made a mistake," and "I wasn't coding the systems." He tried to paint himself as an absent-minded professor who just got overwhelmed by how fast the company grew. He claimed he never intended to commingle funds. It just sort of happened, like accidentally wearing mismatched socks. It was fascinating to watch. It was also legally suicidal. Every time he opened his mouth, he admitted to negligence that bordered on criminal intent. Prosecutors were likely watching these interviews with popcorn, taking notes, and adding years to his potential sentence. He claimed he had only $100,000 left in his bank account. He played the victim. He blamed his ex-girlfriend Carolyn. He blamed CZ. He blamed everyone but the guy in the mirror. But the "aw shucks" routine didn't work. The blockchain doesn't lie. The internal documents didn't lie. And his former friends, Carolyn Ellison and Gary Wang, weren't buying it either. They were already talking to the feds, cutting plea deals, and preparing to tell the world exactly how dumb Sam really was. 13. The verdict. The gavel finally came down. After being arrested in the Bahamas in December 2022 and extradited to the US, SBF faced a trial that felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a reality TV finale. The trial, which took place in October 2023, was a massacre for the defense. His former inner circle, Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, Nishad Singh, took the stand one by one. They didn't just testify, they dissected the fraud. Caroline explained how SBF directed her to manipulate balance sheets. Gary explained how SBF ordered the secret backdoor in the code. Nishad explained how they used customer money for political donations. SBF took the stand in his own defense, a desperate Hail Mary move. It was a disaster. Under cross-examination, his memory suddenly failed him. He said, "I don't recall," over 140 times. The prosecutor tore him apart, showing his own tweets and emails that contradicted everything he said. On November 2nd, 2023, exactly 1 year after the CoinDesk article that started the collapse, the jury returned a verdict: guilty on all 7 counts: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, the whole list. In March 2024, Judge Lewis Kaplan sentenced him to 25 years in prison. He also ordered SBF to forfeit $11 billion. The judge didn't mince words. He called out SBF's apparent lack of remorse and his exceptional flexibility with the truth. He noted that SBF wasn't just a bad businessman, he was a calculated manipulator who wanted to be president of the United States and thought the rules didn't apply to him. From the cover of Forbes to a federal penitentiary in less than 2 years, the effective altruist was now effectively incarcerated. Faustine, the dust settles. So where does that leave us? FTX is dead. Alameda is dead. The crypto market crashed, burned, and is slowly trying to regrow its skin. But the craziest part? The bankruptcy lawyers, led by John Ray III, actually managed to recover a shocking amount of money. Because the crypto market rallied in 2024, the assets they seized, like those Solana tokens and shares in AI companies like Anthropic, skyrocketed in value. In May 2024, the bankruptcy estate announced that almost all customers would likely get their money back, plus interest. Does this mean SBF is innocent? No. If you rob a bank, gamble the money on a horse, and the horse wins, you still robbed the bank. The fact that the victims might get paid back is a miracle of market timing, not a credit to SBF's genius. The legacy of FTX isn't effective altruism. It's a cautionary tale about the cult of personality. It's a reminder that if a financial institution is run by kids in a penthouse who think compliance is a joke, you should probably keep your money under your mattress. It proved that crypto, for all its talk of decentralization and trustless systems, was actually incredibly centralized and required way too much trust in shady dudes with weird hair. And finally, it taught us the most important lesson of all. If someone promises you risk-free returns while playing League of Legends on a Zoom call, run. Basically, Sam Bankman-Fried tried to speedrun capitalism and glitch through the floor into a jail cell. Subscribe so you don't end up funding the next guy's beanbag chair.